Back to old time. Period. Outside. Over. I enjoyed because the
room. Oh, good. That was Andy? Huh? Oh. Well, good morning. What happened?
The hostess and let you see. Maybe they haven't maybe the host hasn't unmuted everybody, huh?
You like this one?
Yeah.
This is my birthday present.
Hello, testing audio for Santa Clarita.
We hear you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mark Henderson, testing audio.
You're good.
Thank you.
much more comfortable.
You're not gonna save cost optimization. You already, guys already posted. You can wait, I thought it's gonna save money. That's what we're looking at. You got solar? Yeah, Mike. The last one. I got pigeons. Finding their way underneath there. Going out of one steering wheel. There'll be no peace in mind.
Where's the parking entrance?
It's a team, right? Okay, I just texted him. Right back to it.
Testing audio for the city of Temecula.
We can hear you, City of Temecula.
Okay, thank you very much.
Larry's in my seat.
It's in Ruben's seat. How about that?
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, City of La Habra.
Good morning, City of La Habra. Feedback. That's the clicker one time.
Just want to make sure you guys can hear us.
We can hear you.
This is Annie Marshall in Avalon.
Good morning, Annie.
Good morning. I'm going to mute myself.
Hello, are we on now?
Yes, we're on. We'll start in a minute.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let's get ready. Today is Thursday, March 2nd, 2023. And if we have members who are participating by phone and we don't have your names on the screen, can you please identify yourselves? Are we good with this?
Are you going to call roll?
Do you want it on the screen?
No, we'll do that with me as we go through the meeting.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Okay, so the meeting of the Joint Policy Committees is now called to order, and I would like to ask Jose Luis Salache to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning, everyone. Please stand. Join me in saluting the best flag. Ready, begin. I pledge
Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the
which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you please confirm quorum for us?
Madam President, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, with the change, we do have a little bit of a new set of housekeeping remarks. So hang in there as we work through them. We're holding this meeting in compliance with Brown Act rules relating to telephonic video conference meetings. While some of our members are participating in person at SCAG's office, and it's great to see you all. Thank you for being here. Other members may be participating by telephone or video conference. Just a reminder, if a member of this body is attending remotely but is not at a noticed location on the agenda, they may observe but may not participate in any discussion or voting of this body. SCAG offices are open for members of the public to attend and participate in person. Members of the public have the option to attend by telephone or video conference, or at one of the remote locations noticed in the agenda. I'll provide some instructions for providing public comment soon. Before I open the public comment period for matters that are not on the agenda, here are the housekeeping items. Detailed instructions on how to join this meeting, either by computer or by phone, have been provided in advance and are also included in the agenda packet. For those who have joined the meeting by phone, please press *6 to mute and unmute your phone. If you wish to raise your hand to be recognized to speak, please press *9. Last, to reduce background noise, please ensure that your microphone is muted when not in use. So we'll move to the public comment period at this time. And I want you to know there are 3 ways to be heard. First, you have the option, but are not required, to submit written comments via email to epubliccomments@scag.ca.gov. Written comments received after 5 p.m. on Wednesday, March 1st, 2023 will be announced and included as part of the official record of the meeting. Have we received any public comments?
Madam President, we have not received any public comments before or after the public comment period.
Thank you. Second, you may remotely address the joint policy committees in real time, and we welcome up to 3 minutes to speak on all items on the agenda. If you desire to speak during the public comment period on an item listed on the agenda, please wait for the chair to call the item. When the item is called, use the raise hand function on your computer or *9 by phone and wait for SCAG staff to announce your name and phone number. Third, you may verbally address the joint policy committees in person, and again, we welcome up to 3 minutes of comment on all items on the agenda. If you desire to speak in person, you are invited but not required to fill out and present a public comment card to the clerk of the board prior to speaking. For purposes of providing public comment for items listed on the consent calendar, please indicate that you wish to speak when the consent calendar is called. Items listed on the consent calendar will be acted upon with one motion, and there will be no separate discussion on these items unless a member of the legislative body so requests, in which event the item will be considered separately. This is the time for members of the public to offer comments for matters that are within SCAG's jurisdiction but are not listed on the agenda. If you would like to speak on an agenda item, please wait for that time to be called. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak?
Madam President, I do not see any raised hands.
Thank you very much. So I'll now close the public comment period for matters that are not listed. With the permission of the body here, I would like to prioritize the agenda items and move our action item to the end of the agenda. Is there any objection to that?
None, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Then we will take that, reprioritize the agenda items. And I'd like to again remind everyone to unmute your phone before speaking. Please state your name during any deliberation, any motion, any second, and then please remember to mute. And then those who have joined by phone, press *6 to mute and unmute. We have a lot of work today, so let's get at it. So do we have on removing the consent calendar? So we are going directly to the approval. Now, where are we going? Information,
item.
the Connect Sal. We're going to number 2 on the information items, Connect SoCal 2024 update. Do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item?
Madam Chair, I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, thank you. So I will now turn this to Kome Ajise, our Executive Director.
Thank you and good morning, Madam President. Good morning, all. It's certainly exciting to be here and see so many in the room today. It really takes us back with some nostalgia, how this room used to be packed and in policy conversations. So we're hoping for that today. On average of once a year, we have this joint policy committee where we bring all 3 policy committees together to deal with a very compelling item. And for us, there's nothing more compelling than the discussion on Connect SoCal, which is a required work that we do at SCAG. It's one of the primary functions at SCAG. It's a primary responsibility to put forth a plan every 4 years. And this plan typically outlines the vision that we have for the work ahead, and especially for our entire region. SCAG being the largest metropolitan planning organization in the country, we feel like we have this responsibility to do this and do this right. We serve about 19 million people across the 6 counties that cover the SCAG region. We face challenges in transportation. We need to move people and goods safely and efficiently in ways that sustain our economy, in ways that sustain our environment, and in ways that sustain the quality of life that we strive for in Southern California. We face challenges in housing the region with affordability currently out of reach for many in Southern California. These are the things that are pertinent to the discussion that we're having today. This underlies our work, and as we prepare a regional plan to serve the diverse needs and goals of each community, we want to be able to make sure that that's represented in our long-range plan, the regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy, which we call Connect SoCal. Over the past year, we have been working with local jurisdictions, every single one of our cities and counties, as well as transportation agencies, to understand their planning work and bring together all of their input for this regional plan. The work of SCAG's policy committees, the regional council, is to really steer this plan through this policy conversations and policy decisions. So as we talk about this today, I ask you to consider the following questions. And of course, you might have more questions than this, but if you keep these questions in mind as we go through the presentation today, so that we have a vigorous conversation at the end. First is, where are we headed as a region? Second is, what issues most need regional collaboration? And finally, how can we make policy decisions to direct our research and our planning activities and planning resources to be sure that we have an impact across the region? So with that, I'm going to ask our senior planner, czar of the plan,
Not quite.
Sarah Dominguez is going to lead us through a presentation on the plan. Just for some quick background, Sarah is a veteran of this activity, this particular work. She led most of the work on the 2020 plan, and so we're so glad to have her leadership on this plan as well. Sarah Dominguez.
Thank you, Kome. And good morning, members of the committees. So my name is Sarah Dominguez, and I lead our Connect SoCal Development business unit here at SCAG. And for the past 2 years, each of the policy committees and at times the regional council have gotten to see different slices of Connect SoCal development. But what we want to do today is to broaden that focus to give everybody the bigger picture of how we're developing the plan, what we need to get done, what we've been doing so far, and update you on the trends that we've been tracking since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The main event for today, though, is the presentation and discussion on the subcommittee recommendations. And then we'll wrap up the presentation today with a proposed update to the policy development framework. So Connect SoCal is SCAG's branded name for our required regional transportation plan, RTP, and sustainable community strategy, our SCS. And like Kome mentioned, this is really our vision for the region's future, how our policies, strategies, and investments will help to ensure that we can improve the region in terms of the economy, mobility, and the environment across the whole 6-county region. So every MPO in the nation needs to prepare an RTP. And unique to the state of California, we're also required to prepare a sustainable community strategy, which integrates our regional development pattern, where we're going to grow with our transportation network to demonstrate that we'll be able to achieve greenhouse gas emission reduction. So our target for this cycle is the same as our Connect SoCal 2020, which is a 19% per capita reduction from passenger vehicle emissions by 2035 from 2005 levels. For our federal requirements, we need to be updating the plan every 4 years, look long range. So for the horizon of this plan, it's 2050. We need to make sure that we're fiscally constrained, meaning that we have the revenues to pay for our projects. And we also must demonstrate transportation conformity and meet some requirements for public involvement. So meeting our federal requirements has long been a critical factor in ensuring the timely funding and implementation of our transportation projects. More recently, there's state programs being tied to achievement of our GHG emission reduction target, specifically SB1 funded Solution for Congested Corridors program and the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. Because our Connect SoCal 2020 achieved our GHG emission reduction target, projects in the SCAG region have been funded up to almost $1 billion in funding from both these programs. So it's imperative that our next plan similarly achieves our GHG emission reduction target so that we can ensure continued funding from these and other programs from the state. So broadly, Connect SoCal development follows 4 broad phases, almost but not specifically tied to each of these years. In 2021, we began with some internal activities and we started to update our public participation plan. Last year, as Comey mentioned, we did 2 key data collection processes for the plan, which was the local data exchange, which I'll speak to more later, and collection of the project list from county transportation commissions. Now, policy development will be continuing into this year, but this is also the year that's critical for our outreach processes and for plan analysis in advance of releasing the draft plan this fall, and then moving towards adoption of the plan next April. But really, as we're trying to develop the plan, what we're doing is answering a series of questions. I'll go into these each, but I just wanted to walk through at a higher level. So first, who are we planning for? We do that by preparing a regional growth forecast. We're asking, how has the region changed? So we've brought forth a lot of different research and studies, as well as keeping track of the emerging trends in the region. How might we create a better region by 2050? So we ask ourselves about what's our vision, what are our goals for the region? Next, where will we grow? And through that, we develop a forecasted regional development pattern. Next, how will we move? And by that, we develop programs and policies, as well as collect the project list from the county transportation commissions. So first, who are we planning for? In 2021, SCAG convened a demographic panel of experts to help us project growth in population, households, and employment by 2050. This panel explored high and low scenarios, and we ultimately coalesced around a preliminary growth projection called slower growth, steady improvement. This reflects an anticipation of far less population growth than in our last plan, though we expect housing and employment growth to remain strong. So this was a starting point for our conversations with local jurisdictions last year through the local data exchange process. And based on optimism from our jurisdictions and integrating their new projects at the local level, what you see in this chart is actually a projection up from an increase from where we started with the preliminary growth projection. So next, how has the region changed? Last February, we held a joint policy committee meeting at which I shared an update on several trends that we've been tracking since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I want to go through a few of them just to provide you an update of where we are now in the region. So after a severe reduction in travel due to the stay-at-home orders in March of 2020, vehicle miles traveled has largely rebounded by 2022 when you compare it to the same month in 2019. Though you'll see here that the vehicle hours of delay is still almost 30% below 2019 levels. And so this can indicate some changes in travel behavior. And we know that there's been changes to driving behavior, notably increased speeds. And unfortunately, this has contributed to the pre-existing trend of increasing fatality and serious injury from collisions. And while some early estimates from for the state of California for 2022 are indicating that we may be reaching the peak of this trend, we're still at very high rates for fatalities and serious injuries from traffic violence. And transit recovery is still needed. Overall, the region's bus ridership levels are 27% below what they were pre-pandemic when comparing September of 2019 to September of 2022. For Metro, bus and rail is at a similar decline. And the need for rail ridership extends to MetroLink, whose ridership is 60% lower than it was pre-pandemic. So for goods movement, during the past 6 years, the global supply chains have witnessed increasing instability. And this unstable supply chain, coupled with fueled consumer demand through e-commerce, has added pressure in the goods movement transportation system throughout the region. The San Pedro Bay of ports have witnessed 26 consecutive months of increased activity, with only 5 months seeing below 10% growth. The last 4 months, however, have shown declines with a loss of market share. Next, teleworking. The increase in working from home was dramatic, increasing more than threefold regionally, with the most largest increase in LA County. This chart is showing data going back to 2006 and as most recent as 2021, with the current SCAG average about 19% work at home rates. And given the increasing trend in workplace hybrid work environments, it's reasonable to envision that this higher rate trend will continue throughout the plan, and we'll see this to continue into the future. But we need to point out that 19% is about half of what we would expect if every job in the region that could telework was teleworking. Those are usually higher wage office jobs, which was about what we were seeing at the start of the stay-at-home orders. That's about 40% of folks working from home. So at the current 19%, that means that 80% of workers are still traveling to a job site. So the next and final trend that I want to provide an update on is housing production. So last month we got year-end data from the Construction Industry Research Board, which showed that there was 53,745 new units added to the region last year. This is the highest amount of new housing units in any single year since 2006 for our region. And you can see the past few years are higher than the annual averages from the past few time periods. So this data, which comes from local building permits, are known to undercount accessory dwelling units. By how much is unclear, but this new data source from HCD with the second graph there suggests that this is a category that is growing rapidly, and total housing production in recent years very likely to be higher than the CIRB data indicates. So when our demographic panel of experts that I mentioned met in August of 2021 to kick off our preliminary growth forecast, one of their biggest reservations towards projecting higher job growth in the region was our ability to keep those workers housed in the region. So despite recent concerns over inflation and interest rates and fluctuations in housing starts, this data is indicating in these gradual increases in production, as well as the input from local jurisdictions showing optimism in housing production in the future, shows that the long-term trend is clearly going in the right direction for us addressing our region's unmet housing need. So next, our question of how might we create a better region by 2050? In summer of last year and in July, we brought draft vision and goals to the policy committees. Currently, our draft vision is a healthy, accessible, and connected region for a more resilient and equitable future. And that's supported by goals in 4 core areas in mobility, communities, environment, and the economy. In your packet, you have an attachment of the policy development framework, which also illustrates not just these draft goals, but also some of the sub goals that have been developed to support and further articulate how we want as a region to reach this vision. So these are still currently draft, and as we work towards engaging with the public in the next couple of months, this is one of the areas that we want to ensure that we're reflecting the broader vision and values of stakeholders in the region. So next, where will we grow? Last year, SCAG conducted a 10 months long local data exchange process by which we met with most local jurisdictions to seek their input on our land use and growth data. This data shapes how our required regional forecasted development pattern, which details where jobs and housing are anticipated to be located in the future. This helps us to analyze the travel behavior in the region once we pair it with the investments and policies, but it's not a binding land use plan. It helps us understand where jurisdictions anticipate this new jobs and housing, but doesn't constrain local decision-making identified in the forecast to areas identified in the forecast. Alongside this technical piece of plan development have been several policy conversations, mostly moving through CHD or EEC, about where to develop in terms of priority areas like near transit and neighborhood mobility areas, as well as strategies for preserving natural and working lands. Up next for this piece of plan development will be an updated regional forecasted development once we incorporate all of that input from local jurisdictions. Next, how will we move? We know that the COVID-19 pandemic altered travel behavior. However, this does provide an opportunity for us to leverage innovative or shared mobility options that can best fit the varying contexts across the region. We've spoken to one of the specific and key inputs to the plan, which is the projects list submitted by the County Transportation Commissions in November. Alongside of that, and to support the exploration of innovative and shared mobility options is this long list of various research and staff reports that have been moving forward primarily through the Transportation Committee over the past 2 years. We'll be able to know more about how we'll move in terms of system performance and performance measures once we start running the model this summer. And that information will be reflected in the draft plan release. But 2 upcoming milestones related to how we'll move as a region are related to goods movement and clean transportation. So now that you've gotten a quick tour of where we've been over the past 2 months, I want to give you a peek at what's coming up near term. One of those processes is, our public outreach. So SB 375 requires SCAG to engage with the public and hold public workshops in advance of releasing the sustainable community strategy. But in order to live up to SCAG's values, we do additional activities to ensure that we're engaging with a broad and representative segments of the population. So we'll be engaging in addition to the open house workshops, both in person and virtual, we'll be engaging with community-based organization partnerships. We'll be doing pop-up engagements, meaning we'll have a table or representatives at events like farmers markets or street fairs to meet people where they're at. And then we'll be doing an online survey as well. So, big picture again, as I mentioned, policy development and discussion both today and in the next several months at each of the policy committees will be continuing this year. Some of the key milestones for one of the key milestones is today, our discussion of the subcommittee recommendations, our public outreach, which will start in April. And then into the summer, staff will be working on the modeling, the analysis, and the draft writing of the plan in order to present the draft this fall, after which we'll have a public comment period. And then once we incorporate the public comments into the plan, we'll present a final plan for adoption in April of 2024. So now we're going to get to discuss the special Connect SoCal 2024 subcommittees. So last year, SCAG launched 3 short-term special subcommittees to dive deeper into key areas for Connect SoCal. This was next generation infrastructure, resilience and conservation, racial equity and regional planning. These subcommittees were each rooted.
One moment, before we go on to this next step, because I think the next step is really important that we get to have our full attention there. Are there any questions for all the information that we've received thus far, or comments?
This is Debbie Perrotta. I can't seem to find my hand up button here. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, so on slide 13, it talks about the increase in seriousness of collisions that have increased since the electrical vehicles. So in a little bit of my research, I'm seeing that electrical vehicles are 33% heavier than internal combustion engines. And so if you take an F-150, the electrical F-150 is almost 2,100 pounds heavier than the internal combustion F-150. So accidents are going to be much more serious. Are we taking any of that into consideration in any of this?
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll have to follow up with our staff on that, but that is something in terms of general safety, in terms of fleet mix and design of our roadways as well. So thank you for that comment, and we'll be sure to discuss that as part of the plan.
And it's something that we should probably integrate into the next generation infrastructure discussion. It should be part of that. So let's do that. I do see a couple hands. What I'd like to do is take the comments and questions from the room here today, and then I will go to those participating by video. So and I see Lucy's card is up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really interesting trends discussion. I really appreciate a couple clarifying questions. On the telework, rounding up to 20% just for purposes of discussion, does that translate to 20% Masos Menos increased road capacity because we don't have those workers on roads because they're at home? And secondarily, does that also make worse the transit issue because we've got people telecommuting? Can we connect those two? And I have one more question after that.
I think that's a great question. And thank you, because I missed my point during that slide that we actually are still trying to understand what that change in trips mean.
Yes.
We know that it's reduction in work trips, but what we're seeing in early data is that there's actually an increase in non-work trips.
Yes.
So, our past assumptions that work from home is great for our GHG emission reduction goal, we're not quite sure that we can confidently make that linkage. So in terms of I think a similar question on that
would be a good
congestion,
something
we're
to
still,
dive
yeah,
down into. I'm really
absolutely.
fascinated by that, especially when the state is telling us all that we can't do increased capacity on a current road. So they don't want us necessarily to widen freeways anymore, for example. So if there's a way to connect those dots, but you're right, at home trips, they're going to the grocery store more often, right? Yeah. Okay. Second question. When we talk about 54,000 new housing, and that's the trend line, could we also put it in context? Again, 54,000 housing units in 1 year sounds great. We're going up, but it doesn't address the deficit for 20 years before that, right? We're not tackling deficit that we haven't built. And 54,000 housing units in 1 year sounds great until you say, but we need 90,000 a year every single year to meet jobs growth and population growth, or we'll continue to get into deficit mode. Is that a fair statement? Something like that. I'm trying to put you into context when you give us a good trends analysis like that.
Right. Yeah. And I think I'll confirm with my colleagues on that, how we can present it better. I mean, I think right now we're seeing it's a good trend. Is it enough? And I would want to ask my colleagues, what is our desired, or what should our target be? I guess if we were to, I don't
And
wanna
I
use the
think
term
that's
target lightly.
absolutely, Sarah. That's what I'm
specific
looking for. Is
connotation, yeah.
give me the target. If the annual target is 90,000, well, 54,000, okay, we're making progress, certainly down from 30.
Sure.
But we still have a deficit to make up as well for all of those years we haven't. So that's why context is really helpful to analyzing trends. Otherwise, it's just a number without a frame. So thank you.
Thank you. And there are some interesting stats on that in our first meeting for Next Gen Infrastructure. When you talk about the trips on the road, they didn't decline necessarily during the day. Margaret Finley, please.
Thank you. This is just more of a comment. I appreciate what you're doing to reach out to the public because I think that's absolutely critical in whatever we're trying to accomplish. And the fact that you're doing something even more innovative, going to the farmers markets and setting up a table, I just think those are really good places for people that it's not totally structured where come to this event at this time, but just doing something as simple as setting up a table and sitting there and just engaging with people. So thank you. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Sharona Nazarian, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you for the presentation. I'm looking at the stats that you're showing regarding transit ridership. And if we have 80% of people traveling to work, what attributes to the drop in the various riderships that we have? Is there any way that we could be increasing that?
Increasing ridership?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that was also, we may hear some more about that in the conversation from the Next Generation Infrastructure Subcommittee, because that was one of their kind of focal questions. I think what we see, transit trips in the region, I'm sorry, I do not have these stats offhand, but they don't represent a huge mode share of the trip. So when we're seeing a 20% of worker is now working from home. That's a large slice in the region, and some of those people were probably the people who were riding transit previously. I think that's why we see, telework jobs are usually higher income, usually office jobs. And so that's why we may have seen some of the more extreme ridership decline on the Metrolink lines compared to the Metro bus and rail system.
And around this, along the same, questioning on slide 17, you mentioned that the goal is to keep people housed in the region who are also working in the region. So how are we, I guess I would want to know how we're working on balancing the spending on transit, because we're spending so much on building various transit as opposed to housing. How are we deciding on that balance if the goal is to keep people in the area where they're working?
I think those are great questions. I think we might hear some of that too. Sorry not to defer everything to the discussions later, but some of the subcommittee recommendations, I think we'll touch to that question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I want to remind our new members that if you look over here on this side, you'll see when you want to be called on, turn your name card sideways and we will see you and call on you. So thank you. I know that it's SCAG world now. So thank you. And I cannot read yours from here. So, oh, okay.
Jenny Crosswhite.
Please.
So this may come up later too, but my question had to do with on slide 23, when it talks about opportunities to leverage innovative and shared mobility options. Are we working, and then it talks about that we got lists of potential projects from the transportation commissions. Are we working with those transportation commissions to make sure that they're aware of what those potential innovative modalities are, so that as they're putting together lists of projects, they're evaluating whether or not those would be relevant to the projects that they're proposing?
I don't know if I can turn to Warren for that. I see a head nod, so I'm assuming yes. So the short answer, yes.
Thank you. And we'll go to Jose Luis Salache, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Back to slide number 17 on housing. I would like to see if we could request this as a follow-up, not necessarily today, but this issue is very prevalent in my community, in my district, the ADU situation. So I would be interested to see this 11,000 number, what that looks like compared to other communities within the region. And two, clarification, it says plus accessory dwelling units. Does that mean in addition to the 54,000? So the 54,000 housing plus the ADUs, is that how I read it correctly?
Not necessarily, because the CIRB data may include some ADUs. We can't just plus them because there may be some overcounting there. But actually I heard some data came out yesterday that may be a better source, but we just haven't had time to analyze that yet.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because it has the 54,000 and I was just curious if it was an additional two, because that changes obviously the, from a percentage angle. But we could get some sort of data follow-up, not necessarily today, but I want to compare like Linwood to Compton, other communities in my district are comparable. In my city, they're happening, very rapidly. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Clint Lorimar, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you very much for the presentation. Quick question on slide 10 about who we're planning for with the preliminary growth, saying here, slower growth, steady improvement. So if with this slower growth, is this slower growth evenly distributed throughout the region, or are there areas that have higher growth? Or so I guess, is there an even distribution of this slower growth? Or
I would have to, we could do that comparison. What we would need to do is compare, maybe we can do that as part of when we release the updated forecasted regional development pattern, and compare where was the growth and at what level in our 2020 plan compared to this plan. Because it's slower growth compared to our last plan. We were projecting nearly 3 million in new population over the 20-year time horizon, and now it's almost half that. So we can do that analysis and prepare that alongside the release of the updated development pattern.
yeah, that'd be appreciated, absolutely. And with the different growth, I know, for instance, in Riverside County, we're we have anticipated previously that things continue to grow. We continue to see increases in population. And we also need matching infrastructure to keep up with that growth. So looking forward to those numbers. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to those participating by the Zoom. And the first is Jason Gibbs and Marsha McLean I have, so I don't know who's asking to
Hi.
speak.
Good morning. It's Marsha McLean. Regarding the transit ridership, I'm hoping that you're going to go back in and do some updated numbers, especially on the Metrolink numbers, and perhaps separate them out by the different lines, because I'm hearing that the Antelope Valley line is almost up to normal at this point. People are anxious to be able to use the Metrolink, especially since they're not working from home as much. So those figures really need to be updated, because I'm afraid that's not giving the correct picture on Metrolink and the other transit. And also, it would be a good thing to separate the different lines, because ridership on different lines is different. Want to say that. The other thing is when you're talking about public outreach and engagement, I'm hoping that you won't forget that there's about 2.5 million people up in the northern county. Our city, as you probably know, is the third largest in LA County. And we have 3 farmers markets, and we have people out here who would be very anxious to participate in your programs and to give their opinions. Because we do have a little bit of a different situation out here with the fact that we are separated from the San Fernando Valley and such, but we do need to come into LA and San Fernando Valley. So those are 2 things that I'm hoping that you will take into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one is Britt Huff, please.
Thank you. Britt Huff, City of Rolling Hills Estates with the South Bay Cities, COG. On slide, well, thank you, first of all, this wealth of information. And on slide 38, where will we grow, that the 5 research and staff reports, I was wonder if you could refresh my memory on the neighborhood mobility areas. Are we seeing a similar consistent movement around the region compared to those leaving the state?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I understand the question. Are we seeing?
Well, in other words, in addition to people leaving this, we hear so much about people leaving the state. Are we also seeing consistent movement within the region? For example, people moving for jobs and that sort of thing?
We can look into that. I don't have that information in front of me right now, but in terms of where people may have moved within the region, I can ask if we can follow up on that as part of an update to the CHP.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. The next is, it's either Kathleen Kelly or Wayman Furman.
Thank you. Do we know the extent to which the positive housing starts in 2022 reflect projects that locked up their financing before the recent change in interest rates? Because my anecdotal experience is we can't necessarily expect that trend line to continue as the projects that locked up financing get built out.
So that data was specific to actual new units based off of permits. So that's a good question in terms of, are we going to continue to see that trend given changes in finance? Thank you.
Okay, that's something we need to look at. And now I have many people, it looks like, at Lancaster.
Madam Chair, if I may.
There's another question.
Oh, yes, you may.
Thank you, Wayman Furman here. I have a question going back to the annual new units. as a follow-up, can we get some comparison to our RENA numbers? I mean, it says 53,000 units, but how can we compare that to affordable housing units that we need in our region?
Yeah, good question. We can provide that data.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next one, now we're going to go to Lancaster.
Yeah, this is Ken Mann, Councilmember Ken Mann with the City of Lancaster. This falls along the same line as what Marcia McLean from Santa Clarita had already shared. Because again, our numbers are conflictive with what's being reported. Our commute is up on, as you said, on the Metro and as well as the 14. And so what I don't want, obviously me being a new member, is I don't want numbers being glossed over where, oh, 20% are telecommuting. That's not the case in the North Los Angeles County. So I'm not for sure how to carve that information off. But what I don't want is that portion, which is a large representation of both using Metro and they're also using the 14. So moving forward, I sure like to see that.
Thank you. That's a really great point. We do need to break those out a little so that we can do our best work on this. Okay, Ms. Takahashi.
Hi, good morning. Tamala Takahashi from Burbank. I have a couple questions. The first one is, and maybe I missed it in the presentation because there's a lot of material, but is there consideration as well for traffic patterns and travel patterns towards and away from business hubs? Burbank is a very large business hub that has 3 different travel options. We have airport, metro, and cars. And the traffic patterns in and out of Burbank is going to be different than, say, other regions. So that's my first question, is about traffic patterns in and out of business hubs. And then the second question is about vehicles mile traveled. Are you putting into consideration vehicles mile traveled with gas cars versus electric cars? Because from an environmental impact, the vehicle miles traveled is different when you're looking at gas cars versus the impact to the environment for electric cars. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think to your first question, yes, as part of the update to our model and an analysis of workplace sites and compared to jobs and how that'll relate, in addition to some of the research that staff are doing. And then to your second question, yes, analysis of the fleet mix does impact the GHG emission analysis. So not just how many cars are on the road in our region, but what kind of car they are as how we get to calculate the GHG emission reductions.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we want to move along because I don't see any more hands up, but I do want to invite anybody who does have any additional comments or questions, please write them down, get them to us, because we want to be able to do the best work possible on Connect SoCal. So we'll now allow you to finish. Thank you.
No problem. And to save us time, I won't try to retread on the same ground, but just to remind everybody that last September, we launched the 3 subcommittees. They concluded their meetings in January and February of this year. And during those meetings, the subcommittees benefited from presentations and panel discussions from a broad range of speakers representing public sector, private sector, community organizations, and educational institutions. Attached to your agenda packet today are each of the draft white papers from each subcommittee. These include discussion on the foundations for each of the subcommittees' work, discussions of those meetings and their key findings, as well as a full list of the recommendations. These recommendations, you'll notice we're not asking for approval today because they do require ongoing discussion and further refinement. Going forward, staff will be elevating these recommendations as we move forward Connect SoCal development items within various staff reports. And this will also inform our regional planning policy development that I'll touch on at the end of the presentation. So each subcommittee was really driven by one or more questions. For the racial equity and regional planning subcommittee, the key questions were, what are the opportunities to advance racial equity through the policies and strategies in Connect SoCal? And how can Connect SoCal guide how planning and investments over the next 30 years address and rectify the effects of racially discriminatory policies in the SCAG region? So now I'd like to introduce the chair of the Racial Equity and Regional Planning Subcommittee, the Honorable Mark Henderson, to share that subcommittee's recommendations.
Thank you, Sarah. I just want to make sure the body can hear me correctly.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, SCAG body. My name is Mark Henderson. I was the subcommittee chair for racial equity in our regional planning subcommittee. It was co-chaired with Colleen Wallace. On behalf of my co-chair, we want to thank Rachel and Elizabeth for their diligence as we work through this really important issue. In the interest of time, I'll kind of go quick through what our goals were over the 4 months. So over the 4 months, we had to identify opportunities to advance racial equity through the policies and strategies in Connect SoCal to guide our planning and investments over the next 30 years to do the best we can to rectify racial discrimination, the impact of racial discrimination over the next 30 years. And then as a body, work on cogent strategies to make sure we can start addressing that issues. Through our discussion, to know where we're going, you have to know where you're coming from. So we had to kind of take historical understanding of past practice in the United States in regards to housing and racial equity. So, and a lot of those presentations were really eye-opening in regards to some of the things that were codified and systematic in some of our housing policies in the United States. We had a chance to look at some data. We had great presentations from speakers, and we learned about some of the issues that we're trying to tackle within our region. Over the course of our meetings, staff noted a lot of our comments. It was passionate discussion, and we worked to create a white paper that has our major themes in regards to what we propose as solutions to the SCAG body. As we all know, racial equity broadly touches every facet of our lives. So our recommendations went a little beyond the specific topic, and we tried to look holistically at the Connect SoCal planning process. So in that process, we came up with 8 recommendations. I will only highlight 3 in the interest of time. The first one was our call for SoCal Connect to be a vehicle to promote racial equity. So that first bullet is the one. Racial equity is a broad topic, but we have an opportunity here as a SCAG body to really think about how we approach racial equity in regards to land use, environment, economic development, and mobility. The first recommendation is look at the Connect SoCal process as a whole to identify opportunities for improving racial equity throughout. One of my major points as the chair of the subcommittee was to make sure that we didn't place blame on anyone in regards to how we got here. It was something that was just, that happened over time. Some things were intentive, some things were purposeful, but we are the group in the body that can start looking at how we actually can now start correcting some of these wrongs. Our second recommendation was to break down the silos at local, state, and federal levels. Through our discussions, we had come to understand that everybody is trying to address the same issue in various ways. However, if we had a little bit more discussion and communication in regards to how other agencies, different levels are actually approaching this issue and figure out where we can link agendas, it will be helpful, and it makes the load easier for us to push down the hill. Our third recommendation, and last recommendation, is to incorporate equity-centered economic activities in our plan. I think as we always talk about housing, we always talk about creating more housing and everything, but if it's more of something I can't afford, then what good is that? So we need to incorporate some sort of economic activity so we can increase the economic engine. Now, I can definitely participate in housing if I'm responsible and a participant in developing any of that housing, so I then have a living wage and I can fully participate. So that's something that we really wanted to highlight as an important priority in our plan. And so, Madam Chair, in the interest of time, I'll just stop there because I know we have a bunch of presentations to follow. So, but I am available for questions and I am open for questions.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the work product that is presented here. And I do want to remind everybody that everything you're seeing on the PowerPoints today, it is in your packet. So if you want to go back to something that's you felt was really important, remember you've got it. So at this time, I'd like to ask if there are any questions or comments, and we'll start again in the room. And I don't see any. And are there any who are participating by Zoom? Oh, wait, we do have one. Margaret Finlay in the room.
Yeah, what can we do to increase Black home ownership? Is there something that or people of color, their home ownership? Is that something that the committee took a look at?
Thank you for that question, and we appreciate that question. That is something that we actually did talk about in regards to how we increase home ownership. And part of increasing the home ownership is actually having economic resources and wherewithal to actually purchase near economic hubs and business centers to have housing versus having housing way in another part of the county and then having commute. So this is something that we didn't have a magic bullet per se to respond to the issue. We realized that we're going to have to partner with those that are in business, that are in real estate, that are in job training or workforce investment boards to figure out how we start increasing the resource and economics of those that are Black as well as other folks of color and indigenous people. So it's going to be an ongoing process and everything. So you're definitely welcome to participate in that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like Oscar Ortiz.
Yes, thank you. I just had one question to bring up. An issue that we came up, that we ran into recently is that we were working with affordable housing developers and seeing if we could require that the development prioritize our city's residents first, right? And we ran into fair housing laws issues there because we couldn't make that requirement from the developers. And I'm just wondering, should we look at those at that kind of policy and see if there's ways that we can make exceptions for issues of displacement during the housing crisis?
Thank you for that question. That's another topic. As you all know, this is we had 4 months to kind of address this topic, and a lot of things did come to the forefront in regards to the way we rethink the things we do in some of our policies, fair housing, requiring developers to have a percentage of low income to very low income units in their developments, but that's still not enough. So those are some of the things that we need to be courageous and actually readdress how we do some of those things, because although a lot of our intent, our past intent has been good, some of them are contradictory in regards to what we're trying to achieve now. So that's where the breaking down the silos with local, state, and federal partners to understand that we're all moving in the same direction and rowing in the same direction. So those are things that we need to look at and then be courageous about maybe changing some of those stances. Hopefully that answered the question.
Okay, Sharona Nazarian, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. One thing that I've realized with racial equality and creating equity is that we need to have a more holistic approach. And one thing that I don't see on this plan, and I'm wondering if the committee is looking at, is education. Because besides offering housing, what are we doing to strengthen the base, whether it's job training and schools educating the youth and letting them know that they could do anything that they put their mind to. So I'm wondering what programs are in place, or if those types of what's being looked at for that.
Thank you for that question. I do agree with you that education is a key part of this issue. As an employee of a community college district here in LA County, education is vital to the actual changing of somebody's lives. However, in the committee, we didn't necessarily focus deeply on education in the Connect SoCal plan, but we did have that as a bullet that needs to be actually expanded upon a little more. So then that goes into recommendations of having partnerships with workforce investment boards and our higher ed space and our K-12 space. As you all know, there used to be shop in class in K-12. We no longer have those available. So is that a discussion with those that are in education to bring those types of learning opportunities back? And where can we partner with the community colleges and our higher ed space, other higher ed spaces, to make sure that education is affordable and accessible to all? This wasn't a primary focus of this committee, but we did annotate that, and it does need to be expanded upon further.
Okay, thank you. And remember, let's try and keep everything succinct. We have so much work to do today. So Adele, please.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Adele Andrade Stadler from Alhambra. And, I just wanted to I think there was a mention of what it is we could do in terms of creating ordinances for our city to help developers go to a more affordable, and we created an inclusionary housing ordinance in Alhambra. Of course, we needed to expand the percentage a little bit, but we didn't want to blow them completely out of the water in 2019 when I was first elected. But what we did do that helped was we also have an in lieu and I believe the city of Glendale does the same thing. There's an in lieu, trust that dollars can go towards affordable housing of your choice. With supportive housing, you can indeed designate the size of your units. And so when you start to make larger units, that means you're helping families.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say, can I just comment on that real quick, Madam Chair?
Please.
Also, I want to say, we want to thank our chair for giving this committee some priorities. She did attend our meetings and was instrumental in our conversations. And that was actually one of the recommendations I came up as an aside, that we all should go back and look at our policies and our infrastructure in regards to what we've codified in our communities and in our regions, to see what needs to be brought forward and modernized, so we can then start working to facilitate the needs of affordable housing. So that's a great suggestion, and that's a model that we should all follow. So that was one of my suggestions as well. So thank you, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Is that Colleen's up? I can't read them, but I think it's yours. Okay. It's our vice chair for this committee.
So I just want to thank our chair. She sprung it on me. She said, I want you to be the vice chair of racial equity and regional planning, which that's what I'm all about. Because I've always said in our city council meetings that people of color, it's hard for them to get homes. And so I was like, Jan, come on now. But anyway, I'm glad to be in this. Thank you, Chair Henderson, for me being your vice chair. And we're going to do good things for SCAG.
Thank you for that. We have a lot of work to do, and we can do a lot of work, and so we will. Our next is Ms. Takahashi, please.
Hi, thank you again, Tamala Takahashi from Burbank. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, for your work on this committee and all the committee members for this important lens to look at our work. Just a quick question. In your looking at increasing inclusive representation and engagement, are you also looking at partnering with nonprofits, community groups, the private sector, even some school districts that are at the forefront of social justice work, that are the experts and have really a good on the ground view of what we can do?
Yes, we are. That was some later, I won't say lesser recommendations, but those also recommendations to start looking at strategic partnerships. Again, this is a heavy lift. This is something that occurred over time. So it's like losing weight. It takes a little bit longer to lose weight because you've gained the weight over time. So again, that was one of the things that I stressed to those that were participating in the committee, that the answers are in the room. We just have to make sure we invite the right people to the room so we can kind of work through the process and understand that this isn't ongoing thing. It will never have an end per se until everybody has a house, everybody has participation in economic engine and everything like that. But we have to just have the courage to just kind of work through the process. So we do recommend and suggest partnerships with those that are on the forefront doing some of these things. And again, figure out where we can link our agendas to move this thing forward. I think that's where some of the challenge is, because everybody believes they have the sole solution to the problem, but we have to kind of have an accordion type discussion to make sure we get everything on the table and figure out the 2 or 3 things that we all can do collectively, then we can work on the rest. So it's going to be an ongoing process.
Well, your analogy spoke to all of us. Good job on that. And I think a lot of SCAG's work going out in the community addresses some of those issues as well when they set up. So now I don't see any other hands. If we can move back then, and so we can keep this moving along.
So the next, we're going to discuss the Resilience and Conservation Subcommittee. So we'd like to invite that chair, Honorable Kathleen Kelly, to present on their subcommittee's recommendations.
Thank you. Invitation accepted. Our committee built upon the work of the Regional Council's resolution on climate change action. And of course, our overarching mission was to come up with recommendations to make sure that the best laid plans for infrastructure under Connect SoCal do not fall prey to climate hazards or stressors. Our 4 sessions were informed by superb presentations from staff and excellent subject matter experts. Because these stressors have been identified by stakeholders as paramount, we had a considerable emphasis on the twin hazards of drought and flood. We were heartened to hear about work underway currently to achieve progress in groundwater management and retention. Using a data-driven approach, we produced 5 recommendations. The first was to refine the definition of resilience to make sure that we are nimble in effectively responding to changing conditions. The second was to prioritize the most vulnerable populations. And I want to emphasize this is not solely the moral high ground. It's also the smart path because natural climate hazards do not observe city or county limit signs. If one community has deficient flood control or fire suppression, that's going to affect others. So we sink or swim together, no pun intended. It is key to assure that all populations are adequately resourced to address climate hazards. Our third recommendation is to build strong partnerships. This includes not just intergovernmental partnerships, but also public-private partnerships, so that we are collaborating about research and development that may bring tomorrow's solutions to today's problems. Our next recommendation is to apply ecosystem-based approaches. Mother Nature has done a considerable amount of research and development in producing native plants that excel at drought tolerance and soil retention under flood conditions. So we want to be assured that we are taking advantage of what the ecosystem offers. And lastly, an overarching recommendation is to maximize mutual benefits by working across systems so that we don't produce maladaptation inadvertently. An example might be the importance as we generate greater density on certain corridors for the benefit of transit, of making sure that we don't lose a tree canopy, which is one of our best tools in fighting climate change and achieving quality of life. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this time, are there any comments or questions in the room for Chair Kelly? And I see none. And I see one on Zoom, Carol Moore and Ross Chun.
I had a comment. I'm very pleased that flooding was included because we didn't see it in the written, so it didn't appear that it was there. I think one concern, flooding obviously is a major concern, and part of the problem is not allowing the water to return to the land. If it's paved, it's very difficult. It not only prevents the water soaking into the land, it actually speeds up its flow. So I'm hoping that's part of that ecosystem-based approach. Thank you.
I assure you that was a major focus of our discussions, and it's very much included.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Margaret Clark, please.
Push to speak, okay. Thank you. I served as vice chair of this subcommittee, and I want to echo what Kathleen said about the tree canopy. And I love the bullet point from the previous, the racial equity, because silos, that's our problem. And some of the housing bills are allowing no trees, no yards, basically, and that is going to tremendously affect the tree canopy. Trees clean the air and reduce the heat island effect. So the unintended consequences of one thing and not thinking about how it's going to affect the other are huge. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Are there any okay, Oscar Ortiz.
Yes, just wanted to follow up on that. You know, we are kind of rethinking the way we do some of those turf removal programs out in for example, in the Coachella Valley and in the desert. We don't want to create those heat islands, right, as a side effect. And so now we're looking at, do we offer more benefits to the customers if they include, let's say, native trees, right? So using those native trees, we're able to shade the homes. And so we're reducing our water use because these trees are used to having very low water use out in the desert. We're reducing our energy use because we're providing shade for the homes and cooling the homes down. And we're also providing wildlife habitat for the naturally occurring wildlife out there. So I think that's one of the very promising conversations that we're having now in the Coachella Valley, and trying to improve our urban greening by using the native plants. That's going to help in those three areas. Thanks.
Thank you. Lauren Meiser, please.
Thank you very much. I'm just really happy to see resilience and conservation on this, that we're looking at this as part of the plan. But I'd also like to say that it shouldn't be limited to environment and natural disasters, but really expanded to include economic stressors and health stressors like the pandemic, we probably wouldn't see so many people working from home if there wasn't the pandemic. So that's a way that we were actually resilient. So if we can, make sure that we think of it in terms of housing and all of these other economic development, et cetera. Thank you.
Chair,
Miss,
could I offer a thought?
please.
The relevance of economic development to this topic was very much a focus in our subcommittee discussions, acknowledging that the jobs need to match where the population is, because excessive dependence on commuting has so many ramifications, not just on air quality, but on capacity of the community to be nimble in response to an environmental crisis. So the connection to economic development is featured in the white paper as a fruit of our conversations.
Thank you. Mr. Casey, please.
Yes, under the category of building strong partnerships, I'd like to comment on the whole risk of a major seismic event, a real disaster. Just the San Andreas alone is probably 30 years overdue on about an every 160-year shakeup, big shakeup. And if we had an 8 or better earthquake that affected all of our regions all at once, you're talking about a lot of people being affected. And it isn't always about strengthening, the structures and all the rest of it. A lot of when we're talking about resilience, can come from people. And in our community, I'm just going to give you an example. We have about 1,400 homes and basically in one HOA, and 5,000 or 6,000 people. And for the last 12 years, we have been, we've actually formed a group that does training on a monthly basis. In fact, we've got one coming up next week again, in regards to emergency preparedness on a house by house basis. And on top of that, that group is set up with block captains and area coordinators, and this is all voluntary. And so, and the goal of that is that it's not if this is going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. And if it happens and it affects millions of people, and we're thinking that the police and the fire department and everyone's going to come save us in 2 days, it doesn't work that way. And so the idea of this was to prepare a community to be able to more or less, as much as possible, fend for itself. Identify the doctors, identify the things that you're going to need. Make sure you got water, make sure that you have all the things that you need, and that you have the ability to communicate during that emergency, so everybody can actually take a lot of work off of the people who serve us in our cities, and in our areas. And I'd like to suggest that's not something that's overlooked. People power and something about resilience is huge. Thank you.
Thank you. I see, well, Colleen Wallace was up. Is it down? Is it? Okay. We'll go to Ms. Takahashi, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Echo. Okay. Thank you so much for the work that you've done on this committee. I'm new to the Energy and Environment Subcommittee, so I apologize if I'm going over things that you already talked about 100 times, but I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And I wanted to kind of circle back to the concept of removing grass, for example, and ornamental grass. And just recently, UC Riverside developed, or they discovered, a new kind of a drought-resistant grass that can replace lawns. And the point that I'm trying to make, though, is that there's always these new developments that are coming up, and it's hard to keep up with the new technology and the new things available, both from this perspective of long-term climate and environmental resilience and reparation, but also, as the previous gentleman was talking about, with emergency preparedness. So I'm wondering if there might be a worthwhile to add to the recommendations is to have a way that the SCAG members can be regularly updated with new and innovative technology and what's available for cities to be able to take advantage of. I myself personally am very much invested in this area of knowledge, so I'm looking for things all the time. But for somebody who may not be out there looking for these informations, it might be hard to know what's important, what's not. So it might be interesting to add to that, just to have a continual pipeline of information to our members so that we know what's available and be able to be nimble and adjust as things are developed. For example, the grass that's available.
And thank you for those comments. And please keep your eye out for the Toolbox Tuesdays and Money Mondays. Those are really great assets for just exactly what you're talking about. And if SCAG provides a great data platform for every one of its members to get that information. So if you go on the website, you'll get a lot of that information, or call SCAG and ask, and they'll be happy to provide you with a lot of that. That is something that is brought to some of the policy committees as well as these subcommittees. So please watch for that, and please alert us to things that you think might be of interest that we need to explore. Okay, I see no other. Oh, okay, Phil Brock, please.
Just briefly, I want to touch on something that one of the other speakers touched on: tree canopy, and making sure that we have adequate green space in our communities, utilizing native plants, as the gentleman from Indio mentioned. But it's really important, if with HCD and the new housing requirements that reduce dramatically the amount of green space on properties for both ADUs and new apartment construction, that we, as Southern California Association of Governments, may need to find financial incentives for developers to keep areas of green space in their complexes. Because if you're a vulnerable child growing up in an apartment, and a developer in our city said, when we said there's no green space in your new 520 apartment unit complex, and that developer said, well, they can play in the alleys behind the parking. This was last January. I hope we're not trying to build housing developments like you would have seen in New York or St. Louis 50 years ago, that we know the health and welfare of our children, the health and welfare of seniors relies on having adequate green space. And finally, if we're talking about resilience, we're also talking about using less air conditioning, less heating. That means tree canopy throughout our region. That means increasing in almost every city the amount of tree canopy, because in my city, in Santa Monica, our tree canopy, our areas that we can stop people from using air conditioning and heating, that's decreasing in our city. We're losing trees, not gaining. In our entire region, we need to focus on how we gain tree canopy, how we make sure there are open spaces available for children and seniors to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other cards up. I see no other hands up online. So we'll move back to Sarah.
Yeah, well, I'll just be passing it along to the last, but certainly not least, subcommittee chair to present the recommendations from the Next Generation Infrastructure Subcommittee, Honorable Keith Ike.
Thank you. At the Next Generation Infrastructure Subcommittee, we considered how the pandemic changed our travel behavior and our patterns. We focused on the evolving role of our highways and explored how to ensure transit recovery. We also looked at how to better align how we pay for and fund transportation with goals for equity and resilience. Overall, the feedback from the members of the subcommittee can be grouped into 4 broad recommendations. You can see them on your screen now. The first recommendation is to maintain a people-centric transportation investment strategy. I think it's really important that we put people first in all things that we do. So I'm glad this is our first recommendation. This includes ensuring that deployment of new technologies support people's needs and address larger shared goals like advancing equitable access. It also means prioritizing our public rights of way for all roadway users, with a special focus on the needs of non-single occupant vehicle users. The second recommendation is to continue to invest in preservation and efficiency. Yes, it's potholes, but it's many more things. This means that it's a fix it first has to remain our key strategy for Connect SoCal, especially recognizing greater needs associated with the transition to zero emission vehicles and ensuring system resilience. With this context, operational improvements and targeted strategic highway capacity expansion are warranted when coupled with complementary efforts to offset potential increases in VMT, especially single occupant vehicle travel. The third recommendation is to expand and enhance mobility choices. This means understanding and meeting the needs of existing transit riders, which will also attract new riders. It can also increase choices beyond driving by enhancing and supporting services across all modes of travel, including transit, active transportation, micromobility, and automobiles. This recommendation includes reconsidering the role of the automobile in our daily lives and how having more travel can increase reliable access. The fourth and final recommendation is to re-envision how we plan, fund, and manage the transportation system. Under this recommendation, we encourage planning and managing the transportation system more of that like an investor, including asserting a role in the digital realm of transportation. We also encourage appropriately pricing the transportation system to ensure the system functions for all users, even during peak demand periods. It generates reliable revenue and establishes resources for addressing equity concerns. I'd also like to thank, I was not the chair at the beginning of this subcommittee. Alex Fish from Culver City was. He's taken a break from public service. I just want to acknowledge and thank him for his public service.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to questions and comments in the room first. And Mr. Betts, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the subject of vehicle miles traveled, I think the conversation started when we were concerned about gasoline powered vehicles, but now increasingly we're going to electric and also hydrogen. A lot of stations in LA are actually putting in hydrogen fuel pumps now. So I'm just wondering, does the conversation change now with the vehicle miles traveled? Is that only a matter of considering for the environment, the greenhouse gas pollution, or is it also just a revenue source now, other than collecting at the refineries? Did your subcommittee take a look at any of that as far as the relevance of the VMT conversation?
Yeah, I'll just quickly note, just like Mark Henderson said, you have to know, or to know where you're going, you have to look at where you came from earlier in his presentation. On my way in here, I saw a billboard that talked about the gas tax, and this relates to VMT. 49 states have 29 cents. California, it's $1.09, the gas tax. Right, we had a question earlier on electric vehicles and their weight. And my point is, the gas tax tends to be how we look at planning and how we plan to fund a lot of these things. And with electric vehicles taking over the single occupant vehicles in our state, that gas tax becomes less and less relevant. So yes, we're looking at vehicle miles traveled. We looked at it extensively.
Thank you. And I see, is that Mr. Brock's? It's hard for me to see from here. No, it is not, is it? Okay, Sharona Nazarian, please.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. I noticed the first point is people-centric transportation, and I'm wondering if, when you're looking at access, if safety is also being looked at, because that is a concern that a lot of people are having now when it comes to public transit. Thank you.
In short, yes, we talked about how to sort of manage the policing and things of that in public transportation as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more in the room here at SCAG? I see Oscar.
Yeah, I had a question. I remember in the past, we had the issue of that we were producing so much solar in the region that we were losing some of it throughout the day, right? Do we still have that issue?
At times we do.
At times we do. And well, because I know that we're trying to expand our hydrogen infrastructure, right? How many people are providing hydrogen? So I think just looking at how do we work with our local agencies to make sure that any power that if we are still losing power during the day, if we can create hydrogen fuel so that we have fuel for later, right? I think looking at if that's what is there, what possibilities are there that are financially viable to do that?
Thank you. I just turned it off. I know that's part of what we're looking at, and I have to share with you, Oscar, when you get a chance, download the ISO Today app, and it'll give you great information about solar. I think you'll love it. Are there any other comments in the room? Okay, I'm going to go to Zoom land then. Lancaster, please.
Yes, hi. Councilman Darrell Doors from Lancaster. I constantly see us talking about energy efficient vehicles, but I have yet to hear anyone say two things. Either how are we going to help with the lower income when the average electric vehicle is $61,000, or what are we doing to help take these vehicles from gasoline to electric vehicles? I know we keep pushing public transit, but as we see, it's all down in some areas of LA. So I'm just trying to figure out what is when we're moving to hydrogen and we haven't really fixed the electrical vehicle issue yet. The price point, have we identified anything to help?
You know, Keith, did you have an answer to that?
We looked at this. We don't have an answer that's sort of easy to state.
Yeah, it's part of the big project right now.
I think it's important to state that the issues are very diverse in terms of stakeholdership that's involved. You know, the automakers, the supply of electricity, supply of hydrogen, all of these are different stakeholders. And our job at SCAG is to be sure that we're bringing this conversation to the table, and where we might have influence in terms of whether it's legislative or policy, we want to bring that to this body so you can make those decisions on where we press to address what's more important. Just to be clear, we're agnostic about whether it's electric or hydrogen. We're talking about zero emissions, and whatever technology works for different folks, we encourage. And we're seeing that a number of our stakeholders are moving in one direction or the other, and some are actually pursuing both. In the case of Orange County and Sunline Transit, we see that they're using the technology judiciously. Where it makes sense, they're using hydrogen, and where it makes sense, they're using electricity, battery-powered electric vehicles. On the equity side of it, whether or not we can help low-income folks, there are programs at the state level that have attempted to do things like that. And there's the program out of the Volkswagen settlement that was used to try and put electric vehicles in low-income neighborhoods as an alternative to driving gas engines. These are all things that we're looking at, and to the extent that we can bring some of those programs to our region, we surely would be working in that direction.
So I just want to make sure I know we got a lot, but my concern is this, because I'm seeing electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles can go the same way. If we don't watch it, the way the hood they put nothing but fast food, and they don't bring whole food places because of the income of the area. And so higher income areas get whole foods, they get great ways of eating and living longer, but in the hood, and I'm just using, I grew up in Inglewood, California, you see a liquor store, McDonald's, Carl's Jr.'s. You don't see really Whole Foods like you do now. They're starting to make sure things are equitable. So I want to make sure even with the cars, with the transportation, we don't make the same mistakes, because it tends to be the higher income areas get these benefits and the lower income areas don't. We're talking equity and inclusion and all that. So we have to make sure we have this conversation. Lancaster, we're net zero city, I get it, but we got to make sure that we are pressing this issue, because the average income, people are leaving California because of how much it costs to live out here. Now we're pushing electrical vehicles. So just want to make sure that we're really pressing that issue. That's all.
Those are great points. And I think it's so important that as we view these policies, we look through the broadest, most inclusive lens we can so that we truly find solution. The other day when I was stopped on the 10, I drive a hybrid. There was a hybrid next to me. There was an electric car in front of me. So we have to look a little bigger than that. The freeway was stopped and we all had alternates types of transportation. So we have to look at it as broadly and exclusively as possible. I have a couple more hands up here in the room, but I'm going to finish up on our Zoom and we'll go to Wendy Bucknam.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the presentation. I waited until all the reports were done because my question is more to all of them. So each of the white papers include an extensive listing of potential next steps that SCAG can undertake to implement these subcommittee recommendations. And I'm guessing this doesn't go to a specific subcommittee member, so whomever would be the right person to answer it. Can you clarify how the strategies would move forward and how they can be prioritized to assist us, and how we would be able to be involved in that effort? And then there seemed to be some considerable staffing and budget, I'm echoing, sorry, staffing and budget implications on those efforts, and that is potentially over several years. That's why I'm interested in understanding how we might prioritize. And if you do your best to give the best answer, sorry, I'm not sure who the right person is.
Thank you, Wendy. And just so you know, you weren't echoing here, and Sarah can take that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Like I mentioned at the top of this item, we're not seeking to approve these recommendations today because they do need further work and direction from each of the policy committees. So this work will move forward alongside various staff reports. One tangible way that this work will be moving forward is actually related to the next update item. Hopefully we can get to that today, but that's related to the regional planning policies that we're developing for Connect SoCal. So that'll be one way in which we'll see some immediate application and further discussion of this work in as that moves forward in the next couple of months.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Trish Kelly, please.
Yes, thank you. This would also be concerning all of the presentations we just had, but is there any potential for any of the next step strategies that we just heard identified in each of the white papers? Is there any potential for any of those to be considered as mitigation measures in the Connect SoCal program EIR? And if so, at what point in the process can we provide input into that process?
So I'll take that question. In short, it's too early to tell. So as part of developing the mitigation measures for our PIR as part of the plan, we still need to do the work of developing the plan and doing the analysis of the associated environmental impacts. And then so as part of that process of the PIR, as we'll be bringing back those mitigation measures, that'll certainly be part of the conversation. That'll primarily move through the EEC, but we can certainly bring these back as part of that discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is the card up this time, Mr. Brock?
Yes, it is. but I will immediately take it down this time. I wanted to preface this by first, a good thing. Someone mentioned hydrogen a little while ago, and my 95-year-old mother purchased a hydrogen car mid-year last year, and she loves her hydrogen car and laughed as the gas prices went up. But the important things I'm concerned about is Councilmember Nazarian from Beverly Hills mentioned safety. And we have to have safe transit lines throughout SCAG. If people are afraid of using public transit, they'll continue to use private cars if they can, or if they are low income, their racial and social equity will be hampered, because when you provide unbundled parking or no parking for some of the new affordable housing projects and people change jobs, how do they get to those jobs, especially if they're afraid of transit, and especially in my part of Los Angeles where, yeah, we have a expo line, an E-line, but you can't connect from that easily and quickly. So I think one of the things that we really need to focus on is rapid connectivity, making sure that for the people who still need automobiles, that they have a place to park them, as we try and make public transit so attractive that they no longer need to use those cars. We can't neglect one. This has to be a holistic approach throughout the area. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I don't see any other cards up. I see no hands on the screen. And I want to thank everybody for the comments. And again, I encourage you, if you have other comments or thoughts, please get in touch with SCAG, submit them. We need to have as robust a discussion as possible. And we want everyone to feel represented and to be represented. Are there any other questions before we move on? And I see none. So I will turn it back to Sarah and Kome.
Yes. So I was just alluding to this update to the policy development framework. Last June, the Regional Council approved our policy development framework for Connect SoCal, which documented our draft vision and goals and outlined the policy priorities for Connect SoCal. This was carrying forward many of the priorities from Connect SoCal 2020, as well as some recent Regional Council actions and reflecting the emerging issues. This was also the document that established the subcommittees. But as we've heard in the discussions this morning, the policy issues, the challenges, and the need for direction is broader than our statutory requirements. So what we want to do to better reflect this need for additional areas of leadership and to document and carry forward some of the ideas that were discussed at the subcommittees is to prepare a set of regional planning policies. So this would be, the purpose of these regional planning policies would be to better document and organize the broad policies of Connect SoCal so that our regional partners and stakeholders can more easily identify alignment with our regional plan, either to support their local planning efforts or while applying for grant resources, and also to steer SCAG's own work in implementing the plan. So what you see here carries forward many of the same policy areas for Connect SoCal 2020 that was identified in the original policy development framework, like system preservation and sustainable development. But it also reflects some of these broader topics that we've heard about today, the need for some policy around workforce development and around how we're supporting our priority equity areas. So in the next few months, we'll be, actually to note, these are draft at this time, so there's still room for discussion in terms of the categories of policies that we'll be developing. But over the next couple of months, we'll be drafting and circulating draft policies with our stakeholders. And then we plan to bring a draft back to each policy committee in June. And so we'll have several opportunities for input, and hopefully this will provide some more transparency to our decision makers as they're moving forward with releasing the draft plan and adoption next year. So I'm not sure if we have time for questions on this, but just to note, this is kind of a proposal to update this framework, and we'll be having further discussions on specific policy areas in the future.
I think we're done.
Okay.
Well, if I may, I just want to take a moment to, first of all, thank everybody for your questions and comments. I know this is not the end of the conversation. This is one of the beauties of the JPC is to hone in on one particular subject area like Connect SoCal and hopefully start the conversation. You will see many of these elements of discussion today in your committees, in your policy committees, and ultimately all of this will come together in front of the regional council. I love the work of the subcommittees that were set up. I think it expanded the conversations we wanted to have on policy, consistent with the direction that we got from the EAC a couple of years ago, to increase opportunities for policy discussion. And hopefully we've had some of that today, and that hopefully whet your appetite for more conversation. These discussions will continue, like I said, in policy committees. In fact, I know that the EEC will be looking at drought tolerant landscaping, which is one specific issue that came up earlier on today. The EEC will be talking about that next month. So you could see how the conversations we're having today will begin to tail out into more substantive and granular policy conversation as we go into the policy committees. But it's not just enough to discuss policy and build a plan. We also will be talking about implementation on the plan, because that's one of the things the state has been asking us to do. And I hear from the comments today that many of you are already jumping into implementation. And our implementation is not necessarily SCAG that implements. In fact, most of the plan implementation is through the various cities in the county, through the programs that the regional council will proffer that would allow you at the city level, at the county level, to actually implement some of these things. So the work continues, and the work is forever for us, if you can imagine. So again, appreciate the input, and this is not the end of that conversation by any means.
Thank you. And
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I know we're short on time, but this is an extremely complex discussion here today. And Comey, I just want to take a minute to thank your staff for putting this together so clearly. And you can see from the comments that were brought forth that we're really very fortunate to have such an excellent, clear presentation today. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that. I too want to thank the chairs and vice chairs of all these subcommittees. It's, we were tasked with a big job, and they managed to herd us all in the right direction. And I want to thank all the new committee members who are on board and looking at these through fresh eyes. And that's an important part of how we go forward. And it's really, really important. Now, what I want to do is we have to get back to our consent calendar, which is number 1 on the agenda.
Move it, Madam President.
Well, there you go.
Second.
They're jumping at it. Okay, did you want a roll call vote for that? Okay, so please remember, everyone, that this is in alphabetical order, so please be ready to vote.
Madam
Yeah.
President, I was going to ask if we can check for public comment and also confirm the second.
Oh, okay, thank you so thank you so much. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar?
I do not see any raised hands.
I think it was the entire room who gave the second, but we'll give it to Larry McCallum.
Thank you. And I'll first call on CHD members. Adele Andrade Stadler.
Yes.
Gary Boyer.
Yes.
Drew Boyles. Wendy Bucknam.
Yes.
Don Caskey.
Yes.
Steve DeRoos.
Yes.
Thank you. Deborah Dorch Porada.
Yes.
Keith Ike.
Yes.
Rosa Espinosa.
Yes.
Wayman Furman.
Aye.
Margaret Finley.
Yes.
Mark Henderson.
Yes.
Cecilia Hupp.
Yes.
Kathleen Kelly.
Yes.
Tammy Kim. Tammy Kim. Lauren Clayman. Matt Lavere. Jed Liano. Annie Marshall. Andrew Maciel, Casey McKeon, Bill Miranda,
Yes.
Joseph Moravito,
Yes.
George Nava, Marisela Nava,
Yes.
Kim Nguyen, Ariel Pay,
Yes.
Misty Perez, Gabriel Reyes, Rocky Rhodes,
Yes.
Sylvia Robles, Sunny Santinez,
Yes.
David Shapiro,
Yes.
Becky Shevlin,
Yes.
Andy Sobel, Helen Tran,
Yes.
Benjamin Vasquez, Aquanetta Warren,
Yes.
Tony Wu, Frank
Yes.
Yokoyama.
Tony Wu, yes.
Thank you, noted.
Yes.
Thank you. Frank Zarunian. I will now proceed to call on the EEC members. Damon Alexander, Cindy Allen. Aye. Phil Brock,
Yes.
Daniel Brotman, Margaret Clark, Jenny Crosswhite,
Yes.
Ned Davis,
Yes.
Rick Dennison,
Dennison, yes.
Sherry Horn,
Yes.
Britt Huff.
Here, yes.
Thank you. Joe Kelmick,
Yes.
Elaine Litzer,
Yes.
Vianney Lopez,
Yes.
Lauren Meister,
Yes.
Oscar Ortiz,
Yes.
Deborah Robertson, Jennifer Stark, Tamala
Yes.
Takahashi, Connor
Yes,
Trout.
this is Tamala Takahashi, yes.
Thank you so much. Connor Trout,
Yes.
Connor Trout, Dale Welty,
Yes.
thank you. I will now proceed to call on the Transportation Committee members.
For clarity, did you get my vote? Jennifer Stark, yes.
Noted, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ed Wilson, yes.
Did you get Huff? Did you get Huff?
Mr. I've got Huff for Mr. Wilson. We do
Thank-
not have you at a notice location and you're also not present, so we cannot call on you for a roll call vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the Transportation Committee members, Catherine Barger, Elizabeth Becerra,
Yes.
Brian Bergson, Russell Betts,
Yes.
Art Brown,
Aye.
Ross Chun, Andrew Doe, Darrell Doris,
Aye.
John Dutray, James Gaisley,
Gaisley, aye.
thank you. Jason Gibbs,
Aye.
Kurt Hagman,
Hagman, aye.
Jan Harnick,
Yes.
Laura Hernandez,
Yes.
Mike Judge,
Yes.
Fred Jung, Trish Kelly,
Yes.
Linda Krupa,
Yes.
Richard Loa,
Yes.
Clint Lorimore,
Aye.
Ken Mann,
Yes.
Steve Manos,
Yes.
Ray Marquez, Larry McCallan,
Yes.
Marsha McLean,
Yes.
Carol Moore,
More, aye.
Ara Najarian, Maria Nava Frolic,
Aye.
Frank Navarro,
Yes.
Sharona Nazarian,
Aye.
John Primmett, Gil Rebollar, Ed Reese,
Yes.
Crystal Reese, Ali Saleh,
Yes.
Tim Sandoval, Zach Schwank,
Yes.
Marty Siminoff,
Yes.
Jeremy Smith, Jose Luis Solache,
Yes.
Wes Speak, Karen Spiegel, Cynthia Sternquist,
Yes.
Yes. Steve Ty. Michael Vargas,
Yes.
Scott Voigt. Donald
Yes.
Wagner. Thank you. Don Wagner. Was that him? Colleen Wallace,
Yes.
Alan Wapner.
Yes.
Madam President, the motion for the consent calendar passes with 79 votes yes, 0 abstentions, and 0 no votes.
Thank you very much. Okay, that wraps up our agenda. I want to thank everyone for their participation. Lots of great ideas. I can tell as everyone sees, this is kind of the beginning of the discussion. I know we're going to have a great product at the end of this process. So thank everyone for participating. And I see no unfinished business, well, really lots, but at this meeting, no unfinished business, so the meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.